Hello, my name is Diversity, and today we're going to be going over a close enough to comprehensive guide to the Noxian Grand General adventure for Legends of Runeterra, the Path of Champions. This is the adventure against Swain. It is a 5-star adventure. It is the upgraded version of Vi's 2-star campaign adventure, which is called the Beatdown Exchange Program. Most of the decks are similar, if not exactly identical, but this is a much harder adventure because of the special rules, which are Unending Siege, which is game start, the foe summons 3 city breakers, and Deadly, this is where Deadly originated, I think. When the foe summons a unit, grant its stats equal to half its stats rounded up. The foe's spells and skills deal double damage. So for this, we're going to go over the map, the tips and tricks, how the adventure works, and we're going to go over each individual node so that you know what's inside of it and what to do about it. And if you need to skip towards anything, feel free to do so. There will be timestamps. First off, this is the map, and it's a pretty large map. Your mid boss is going to be Jhin, and your end boss is, of course, Swain. And we're going to go over each of these little nodes individually because it's just kind of too much to put here. If you notice that it's a little off, it's because I screenshot it in parts and then I put it together. Okay, and this is our node overview. You can look at this if you want. We're going to go over these, like I said, individually. There are 2 general paths you can take, top and bottom, and this is what you will find in each side. So let's get into that. At the start, you're going to take a power, and then you fight Reckless Trifarian. That's always a thing, and then you get your support champion. That's always the same. At that point, you can choose then to either go towards Manasoul Student if you go top, or Legion Marauder if you go on the bottom. And behind either of those choices is an event node, and those, I think, are fully randomized. I wasn't able to find any consistency, so I think they're fully randomized. And then if you go up top, from those event nodes, you can get to Lord Broadmane, and if you go down, you get Crimson Aristocrat. And then on this, at the top and the bottom are a random event, but the middle is always going to be a shop. Going on from there, you will find the healer, and then Jhin, and then after Jhin, you get a power. And then you get another choice. You can go top for Minotaur Reckoner, or bottom for the Stagehand. If you choose to fight Minotaur Reckoner, you get a power, and if you go the bottom, then you get a random event node, and afterwards you go toward a shop, and then if you go top, you get the Maker, or the bottom for Trifarian Gloryseeker, and then you will find a random event node after those 2, and then finally you get a healer and then Swain. So that is the map. How Swain works. Basically, every node plays kind of the same. You will always start with the attack token. I think they fixed the bug where Minotaur Reckoner, sometimes you wouldn't. This means that rounds 2 and 4 are going to be your worst rounds because that's when your opponent's going to attack, and you need to survive those rounds, and then you should be able to stabilize the board usually. In most nodes, they'll run out of power if you can survive those, and then you can be fine. They do have a lot of stun in all of the nodes, a lot of removal, and a lot of front-loaded damage. So on round 2, it's not unusual to take 20 damage or more. And then once you're stable, you need to figure out how to heal. And after you heal, you can win. Alternatively, you can win in 1 round. You can do that with certain champions, Aurelian Soul in particular. Otherwise, this is going to be general play pattern. Unending Siege is the main problem here. So at the game start, you get 3 city breakers, and these city breakers are 2/8 because of Deadly, and they do 1 damage to your Nexus at round start. So when you start the game, you're going to take 3 damage because there's 3 already on the board, and then every round that they're alive, you're going to take 3 more damage. 1 from each of them. This is not enhanced by Deadly because it's not a skill, so you're not going to take extra damage, but you do slowly lose life because of this. Now, to counter that, you can use turret plating or defense spending. defense spending is Heimerdinger's Pay to Win relic, and it just is a power that gives your Nexus tough. If you have this, the Swain adventure becomes a lot easier because you're not taking 3 damage every round. Also reduces every damage you take from his extremely wide boards by 1. And then the alternate to that is turret plating, which gives your Nexus tough, but your champion has to be on the board. And one way you can do that is by using low-cost champions. That way, turret plating is on. As soon as turret plating is on, everything becomes a lot easier. And for a support champion, this is not an exhaustive list of what you should pick, but you're going to want to take something that can drain or something that gives you lifesteal. So Morgana has lifesteal inherent. She also curses when you summon her, and that can help. You have Gwen, who when she attacks, she drains from the enemy nexus. That helps you stabilize as well. If you can give her extra power, she'll drain even more. And you have Shen, who comes with Spirit's Refuge, which you can put on something to give them barrier and lifesteal, and you can heal back that way. Other things you could do, like Ionia, generally will give you access to more lifesteal stuff, so Shadow Isles, so you can get like Vile Feast, for example. Not that that's super strong, but you have options there. So you're looking for a support champion that will augment your game plan by giving you a way to sustain, or play a champion that will sustain on its own. So champions to use, you only have to win 5 times. And I suggest only winning 5 times. It looks like there's going to be a 5-star adventure needed to be completed with every new champion coming up, or one of a set of new champions every month. Lysandra is generally going to be easier than Swain, depending on what that champion looks like. As far as we can tell, I would say Lysandra is going to be easier. Swain punishes you very quickly by having very wide boards and just doing direct damage to you. So I think generally speaking, especially for any high-cost champion, you're going to be way better off doing Lysandra versus Swain. So that's my first discipline trick. Don't if you don't have to. But if you have to, here are a list of champions that do pretty well into it. So Aurelian Soul, obviously. You have Gwen, because she can lifesteal and win in turn 1 or 2. You have LeBlanc, who can control the entire board. Nami can heal forever. I put a star next to the ones that I beat it with. You have Nidalee, who can do a lot of damage really fast. Also, probably good for blocking and removing our opponent's units. Viego, if you get Trifarian Might, is totally fine. If you don't, then no. Echo, if you use like a bunch of Guardian Orbs, can roll into things that are useful. Jace, I think, would be able to stabilize fast enough, and then you can randomly roll lifesteal with his 6-star spells. Jinx can just clear the board, so she's always fine. Ari is very strong. Lilia, also very strong. You're probably going to want to find like Vampiric Scepter on her, something similar, so that she can gain life. Master Yi, if you roll for Wild Inspiration, can go infinite. Yasuo is just always good. He will take a bunch of damage, so you're going to find a source of lifesteal, but he can control the board with his stuns, and then you're going to take a lot less damage than you normally would. For Demacia, you have Lex Illuminated, who can just make very big units. You can also roll lifesteal on her Lumino sprites. And Morgana, who has inherent lifesteal, you can make her bigger through her invokes, and you can put Wicked Harvest on her. If you do that when you drop her, she does 3 damage to every unit, and she gets lifesteal from all of that. So if your opponent has a full board, she'll gain 18 life back, which is pretty good. Another thing to do is look at other people's spreadsheets. I'm going to link a couple in the description that have the builds that people used. There were a couple of people that made particularly good ones, and I cannot remember the names right now. I thought I wrote it down. Okay, I am back. We have PetiB, who has an encounter guide for, basically, he took everyone's adventures, what they won with, and put that into a spreadsheet. And then we also have SartAlfard. This person beat it with S rank on all of the champions that were available at the time, and put down notes on how they did it, and also their builds and stuff like that. So you can look over those. That'll give you the relics that you want to be using. You can find something that fits your play style, and yeah. So I'm going to have links to those in the description. I'm not going to go over them specifically. Yeah. I'm not sure if I said number 2 first, but B level 30, that gives you access to all of your rare relics. That'll help. It also gives you your 40 Nexus health, which will definitely help. Low-cost champions do play a lot better because you can get turret plating out early, which again prevents a ton of damage that you would normally be taking, and then find lifesteal and drain, and then find some source of removal. You need to be able to get rid of certain very threatening units, especially at the end where you have Swain, who has 18 hit points. That's kind of hard to remove, and if he's on the board, he will ruin your life. So just be aware of that and kind of try to find a solution for it as soon as you can. Although normally by Swain you've collected enough powers where you're pretty strong and he's less bad, but he can be a disaster. For powers, you have your normal, very good powers like Duplicate and Perfected Mana Flow. Obviously, normal Mana Flow, very good, and gives you mana. Disarmed is strangely good because it will reduce normally like 6 damage that you would take, which is pretty good. And Feebling Strike for the same reason, although you do have to do damage in order to take advantage of it. And then you want your summoning things that'll help stabilize you in the early rounds. So like Gearing Up, Little Buddies, Vanguard Lookout. There are a few more, but these are the ones that produce more than one blocker. And then you have your generally good defensive powers like Hold Them Off, Treacherous Terrain, and Hold It. And Urumi Shield is really good because it heals you. A lot of times you can stall out and then cast a bunch of spells to get your Nexus health back. Again, once you have control of the board, usually you don't lose that. There are a couple adventures where you might, but generally speaking, you're able to heal to full after you've stabilized. And Welcome Gifts can randomly roll you into lifesteal, so that is good as well. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's pretty close. Everything else would depend on your specific champion. These are just kind of your generally good powers. And then the first thing that we fight is the Reckless Trifarian, who has 40 health, 2 mana gems, and 27 cards in their deck. Their power is Incapacitation, which means your units can't block. I've highlighted in red the things that I feel are the most threatening. In this case, you have Arena Battlecaster, Chempunk Shredder, and I typed Chempink Shredder, so we'll fix that. Alright, Chempunk Shredder and Death Lotus. The reason Chempunk Shredder is bad is because when he comes down, he does 1 damage to all your units, and damage units can't block. Arena Battlecaster gives everything +1, so it ends up being usually 6 bonus damage, and Death Lotus, when you're attacking, you're kind of going to want to win, because if you don't win on the spot, all your units will then be damaged, and you either need to replace them or you're not going to be able to block. So if you want to read over these, there's going to be this for everything. I say how many cards of each are in the deck, what items they have, and their cost, power, and health. In particular to note is like Mana Deposit on Basilisk Bloodseeker. When they play them, they can play it multiple times. Usually they'll have 2 in hand by the time they get to 7 mana gems. And then I didn't say what the items do, but hopefully you've played enough that you know. Staunch Defender means they start with 1 in play. That's the other big thing that happens. So yeah, after this we shouldn't have to go over each one individually. It's really boring to read like a deck list, but it's important to know what's in the deck so that you know what to watch out for. It also has Guile, so he can stun a unit before they attack, so just watch out for that. They usually won't use Blade's Edge unless they can kill a unit, so they're not going to use it like preemptively to damage your unit and then make it so you can't block. Yeah, and then I took some screenshots of things that I found important. So like, this is an average round 2, and that's not true just for Reckless Trifarian, that's true for every adventure. I didn't put that on each adventure, but they're all kind of going to look like this. You can see that I played a single unit, and I'm going to be taking 21 damage. I'm already down 6 Nexus health, because this is round 2, so you took 3 in round 1, and then 3 more in round 2, and so this is just very normal. At the end of this, I'll be at 13, unless I have something in hand to stun a unit or whatever. So this is very normal. Yeah. And then your biggest threats are going to be, like I said, Chempunk Shredder coming down, and this is the 4 on the left and the after on the right. As you can see, anything without Spell Shield took damage and now can't block. So you just have to worry about that. And yeah, that's the main problems with Reckless Trifarian. You usually can get through this if you need to like reset your powers at the start. It's not too hard. It does take a long time though, because you're not very powerful in the first game. And yeah, but they're not that powerful either, so you can usually get through it. If you can't, you're probably going to have problems with the rest of the adventure on that champion, and you might need to rethink what you're doing. The second thing you can do is Legion Marauder. This is if you go the bottom path. He has 50 health, 3 mana gems, and 27 cards. I think the most threatening cards are Legion Marauder. It does come with Immortal, which means it has Deathless, so you have to fight each one twice. The Legion Marauder's special power is when they summon a Legion Marauder, shuffle a Legion Marauder into their deck. Also, my deck lists are probably correct, but some of them were harder than others to figure out what exactly was in their deck. For example, Legion Marauder. I think there's 4 Legion Marauders that it starts with. Might be more. Hard to say when they shuffle an extra one into the deck every time. I tried my best. They also have Invasive Tactician, who is going to be an 8/8 with Rally and Reputation. He costs 2 less, so he can usually be played at 6 mana gems. They have Strength in Numbers, which is a slow spell which summons 2 Legion Marauders. This comes with 2 health potions, so it heals 16 when they play it. And they have Savage Reckoner. I have pointed out basically everything that has Overwhelm in this adventure, because Overwhelm is not blockable, and so you need to be aware that when these come down, you're going to have to deal with that in some fashion. And what I posted here is like a sample of kind of what it looks like when Legion Marauder gets out of hand, and it kind of looks like this. Every time they attack, each Legion Marauder gets +1/+1, so if they attack 6, then all the Legion Marauders get +6/+6. They're very hard to remove because they keep shuffling back into the deck, and yeah, eventually this will become an overwhelming thing. That said, I'm not sure if that's better or worse than our next guy, Manasoul Student. I believe Manasoul Student is easier. Their special power is game start all players summon a Manasoul Student. This does give you a blocker, which is nice. Manasoul Student has 50 health, 3 mana gems, and 30 cards, and I find them to be very dangerous, in fact. They do have Ravenbloom Conservatory with Home Turf. This will play about half the time. If it's a card in their hand and they don't mulligan it, or they mulligan into it, then it will just be in their hand and not automatically in play. So that happens fairly often. And the threats are, of course, Manasoul Student. When you play a fast, slow, or skill, it plays Magic Embers, which will do 2 damage to your Nexus because of Deadly. They have the Prefect, which starts as a 6/8, and it has Overwhelm and Fearsome, and it grows every time they do anything, basically. There's Let Loose, which does 6 damage for 2 mana to a follower. That removes your blockers pretty well. Spellslinger, which will stun one of your blockers. Ravenous Flock, which they can then follow up with after Spellslinger to remove a unit. This happens pretty often, so let's say play a champion, they'll Spellslinger into Ravenous Flock, doing 8 damage to it. That is fairly common, so just watch how much mana they have when you're doing that. And there's Captive Greyback, who, because of Deadly is really powerful, it also has Overwhelm. So they attack and they do 6 damage to the blocker. If it's dead or gone, then they do 6 damage to the enemy Nexus instead. And they have 5 power, so even if you block, you're usually going to be taking 5 damage from Captive Greyback, because it'll usually kill your blocker from the Overwhelm. They also have Thorn of the Rose, which will create more stuns, so just watch for that. And then the other stuff, not that really... yeah, it doesn't really matter too much. I believe this to be easier than Legion Marauder for the most part, unless you are able to consistently make a full board or remove units. You do take more chip damage here, and they can get rid of your units very fast. And the Prefect has Overwhelm, so if they play the Prefect early, it's a really large threat. So it's kind of a toss-up for me between those two. Next, if you go to the top path, so if you kill Marauder, Manasoul Student, and then you go top again, you'll fight Lord Broadmane, whose power is when the foe plays a skill, grant their units +1/+0. It plays a lot of skills. The biggest threats in this are Lord Broadmane, the Prefect, Chempunk Shredder, Blade's Edge, and Make It Rain. And that's because Lord Broadmane has this thing, his Staunch Defender, so it starts in play. And for the health and power, I have it at the deadly costs, just so you can see then you don't have to do the math in your head. Lord Broadmane on play does 4 damage to an enemy, and also has the text, your fast spells, slow spells, and skills have when a damage a stunned or damaged enemy, kill it. So Make It Rain can damage your units, and then they are susceptible to Blade's Edge. Again, the computer's not very smart. They're not going to Blade's Edge just because you're stunned, but you can run into something like that accidentally, perhaps. You have the Prefect again with the Overwhelm. They do a ton of spells and skills. You have Strategic Execution, which can stun 2 units, but also importantly can summon a Legion General. Because they're stunning a ton of your units, it can come out as a very large unit. In this case, I took a picture of it at 1818. You have Chempunk Shredder again, who does 2 damage to all enemies. So if Lord Broadmane's on the board and you block something and then Chempunk Shredder comes down, your unit will die. Or if they used Make It Rain and then Chempunk Shredder came down, your unit will die. Thing you want to do here is remove Lord Broadmane as soon as possible. They have, let's see how many copies, I wrote it down. 3 copies of Lord Broadmane. They might have to do it 3 times. And yeah, so you just need to be aware of these things. Lord Broadmane is very tough. It is a hard adventure. I would suggest not going that way if you can avoid it. Sometimes you'll try to pick it because maybe you're feeling strong and there's like a good event on that path. Yeah, I wouldn't. And then you have Crimson Aristocrat. This is if you go the down path. So let's say you fought Legion Marauder and then went down. You can get here from either Legion Marauder or Manasoul Student. If you take Manasoul Student, you do have to go down the middle path to get there, though. And Crimson Aristocrat has 50 health, 3 mana gems, and 29 cards. Their main threat is actually their enemy power, which is read as her lips. Round start, deal 1 to all units, then grant the foe's units +0/+3. This makes it hard to remove the enemy units. So in particular, the City Breakers will get very big. On top of that, dealing 1 damage will synergize with a lot of the deck. And it'll also deal 1 damage to all of your units, which means that your units with low health will eventually die. They have Death Lotus, but no other pings, so as long as you're not attacking or blocking, you don't have to worry about being at 1 health. You can still block, but if you are at 1 health, that means that at the end of the round, you are going to die. Your unit's going to die, so just be careful and watch out for that. The threats are Crimson Aristocrat. Her main deal... Wow, I can't talk. The main threat is Crimson Aristocrat, who will deal 1 damage to an ally and grant them +1/+0 and Overwhelm. That Overwhelm is why she's threatening, otherwise it's really not that bad. They start with Crimson Disciple in play from Staunch Defender. When it survives damage, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. Is kind of the same as just another City Breaker. But it'll also happen when you block or when they block. So if you don't have turret plating on the board or defense spending, you're going to want to find a way to remove that. Otherwise, you're just going to take extra damage for free. They have the Crimson Curator, who, when they survive damage, creates a random Crimson unit in hand. This basically gives them infinite value. They can just keep playing units out. And you have Crimson Awakener. When they're summoned, deal 1 to all other allies. This will synergize with all of those things. And you have Legion Veteran, who, when another ally survives damage, granted +1/+0. As long as he's on the board, everything's going to grow by 1 attack every round at the minimum. So yeah, you just need a way to remove all this. Again, these are threatening units, but they're not as bad as Lord Broadmane. It's like not even close. One thing you can do is if you reduce an enemy's health to 0 or to 1 with one of your pings, they'll die at the end of the next round before they get the +0/+3. So you can do that. Other than that, you just need blockers and damage to remove them. If you have things like Arcane Comet, like if you take that relic, then you'll be able to remove like a fixed unit every round, which is pretty nice. Otherwise, yeah, you just need your units to be bigger than their units, and hopefully your units won't die from Renaissance Lips. Still much easier than Lord Broadmane because there's less overwhelm. The mid boss is Jhin. Jhin has 50 health, 3 mana gems, and 29 cards. I apparently decided not to say what his main threats are with highlights. That's a little unfortunate here. Fortunately, we have the ability to pause. So I think the main threats are Jhin, the Stagehand, and Vile Feast. So Jhin's enemy power is elaborate plans. The player's units have Nexus Strike, create a fleeting Blade's Edge in the foe's hands. Just don't attack him until you're ready to kill him. Kind of the easiest way to deal with that. Doesn't really matter. He does start with Jhin in play, and Jhin has Warting Charm, which means he has Spell Shield. Again, the main threats are the Stagehand. I guess Yone is kind of there too, but Yone doesn't usually come out till a bit later. Which stuns an enemy, which gives him really good attacks. He has Lotus Trap, which will randomly just do 2 damage, or will stun the weakest enemy. That's the main problem. It also does 2 damage to the enemy nexus. That's not the bigger problem. And he has Vile Feast, which does 4. So you just have to worry about that as early removal, which Jhin does. When Jhin attacks, and I didn't put this in, he does 4 damage to all stunned enemies, and so you have to watch out for that. It's on his card. So yeah, when he attacks, he does 4 damage to all stunned enemies. I think when he levels up, it's more than that. Let's see. Yeah, it'll do 8 because of the deadly power. Normally it would do 4. So you can take just like an absolute ton of damage once he's leveled up to your Nexus, and you can't really do anything about it. So yeah, and that's Jhin. So basically, his play pattern is going to be something like you play a low-cost champion, he kills it with Vile Feast. Then next round, you play something, and then he'll counter it with like the Stagehand, and then attack you. And now, since your unit's stunned, it's gonna die to the 4 damage from Jhin's attack. You're also gonna take a ton of damage from all the units that he's throwing at you. Yeah, so that's kind of how that goes. He also has the card Shady Character. Usually he'll copy a City Breaker because it's already on the board. He can play that round 1. So you might have 4 City Breakers on board by round 2, and then Jhin, and then usually like the Stagehand is a pretty common pattern. So just watch out for that. If you can remove Jhin from the board, everything else is going to be fairly easy. I think there's only 2 copies of Jhin in his deck, the one that he starts with and then one more. So you're not going to have to worry about like removing him 4 times, but you do have to worry about removing him that first time in particular. And with the Spell Shield, he can be kind of hard to remove. If you can throw a blocker at him with 6 power, it's totally worth that trade. And you just have to be worried about when he attacks. He might use Lotus Trap, or you might proc a Lotus Trap, I guess. You can't use it on purpose. And if he does that, it might stun the thing that you were planning on blocking him with. So just try to make sure that if you have more than one thing to block with, you're not blocking it with your weakest ally. So yeah, and that's Jhin. Next we have Minotaur Reckoner. I would suggest absolutely never going this way. If you're feeling particularly strong, you can because there's a power after, but you're going to lose more often than not unless you're, like I said, very strong. Minotaur Reckoner has 80 health, 5 mana gems, and 38 cards in their deck. Their special power is round end, deal 4 to the player's stunned units. And their main threats are Minotaur Reckoner, of which I wrote down that they have 5. I don't know if that's true. This deck looks weird. I'm going to assume that I did it correctly. So we're going to say there's 5 Minotaur Reckoners, 4 Thorns of the Rose, 4 Legion Generals, and 3 Aatrox Glinthorns. And they have the Kayle power. They also have Sharpened Resolve, but like, whatever. Who cares? It'll make one of their units stronger, so when you're blocking, just be aware that you might need 2 more damage to kill a unit than you would otherwise. They also have Arachnoid Sentry in the deck, so that is another stun. And yeah. So I guess they have Legion General? Yeah, okay. I wrote that down. This took me like a long time to set up, and sometimes your brain's fried. So, Minotaur Reckoner is the main threat, along with Pit Fighter. Round start stun the weakest enemy. This means that you will need at least 2 things on board in order to be able to attack, or to not be stunned, or to block. So yeah, that's a thing. Just be aware of that. So you want to remove the first Minotaur Reckoner as fast as possible. That'll give you a little bit of time, I guess 1 round before they play another one, because they start with 5 mana gems. They are able to create a ton of stuns, and they can do that with the Guile spell, which has Grifter's deck and Elixir of Skill twice on it. So basically they have infinite Guiles in their deck. So yeah, you just have to be aware of that. Anytime they have 1 mana, they probably are able to stun you, and that's going to happen on your attacks and their attacks. So just be aware of that. They have Thorn of the Rose, which will create more Guiles in hand, and as soon as they can play 1 Guile, 2 more are in the deck, and they draw into each other. So Minotaur Reckoner can sometimes fill up his hand, which is a thing, I guess. They can burn cards, but he does have basically infinity stuns, and again, anything that is stunned will take 4 damage at round end. He also has Legion General, which is obviously going to grow bigger and bigger with each one of those stuns. And you have Aatrox Glinthorn, whose attack stuns all damaged enemies. It also comes with mana deposit, so he plays it for free. So anything you block with will then become stunned. All of those stun units obviously can't block in the future, and also take 4 damage at round end. So yeah, just be aware of that. And again, Arachnoid Sentry can be played to stun a unit as well. So Minotaur Reckoner, like I said, is very strong for all of those reasons, and I would avoid him as much as possible. If you do fight him, you just need to remove the Minotaur Reckoners as quickly as possible. And usually you need to remove Aatrox Glinthorn as soon as possible as well, because he's just going to make it so you can't block, and that's bad. Legion General also comes with Overwhelm because of Great Club. So yeah, it's just all around bad. Don't do it. I would avoid that node as often as possible. Your second option, so that's if you go the top path after Jhin. If you go the bottom path, you fight the Stagehand, whose power is when the foe stuns an enemy, give the foe's strongest unit +2/+1 this round. As you will note, that does not say grant the foe's unit +2/+1, which makes him not a consistent threat. You'll note that I did not highlight any of his cards as a threat because Stagehand isn't very bad. A Stagehand has 70 health, 4 mana gems, and 23 cards. That means the Stagehand can actually kind of easily be, decked out. That happens fairly often. Stagehand doesn't have any super powered units. You have Staunch Defender on Green Glade Lookout, and Fearsome on the Stagehand. I think that's what Serrated Dirk is. Yeah. So the only thing you have to worry about is like Keeper of the Mask coming down, which gives everything +1/+0. He has Green Glade Elder, which gives everything +1/+1 in hand. You have Steel Tempest and Concussive Palm. These can stun you. Steel Tempest only on your attack, so it's not too bad, and Concussive Palm on theirs. And the Stagehand also stuns, and it does come with Fearsome, like I said, which means it's hard to block. It does have like really high stats. 6 attack is pretty bad, but I mean, compared to Minotaur Reckoner, this is nothing. One thing I feel like is that the devs put a lot of time into the first half of the adventure and on Swain himself, and the middle 4 nodes they didn't do as much work on. Either that or they did and just wanted to leave you an easy option. Stagehand is an easy option. I would take it pretty much every time over Minotaur Reckoner. If you go Minotaur Reckoner, you're likely going to lose. And if you go Stagehand, you're likely going to win. Because, I mean, look at the health and power here. It's not very strong. 6 is the top power, 5 is the top health, I guess, on Keeper of the Mask. But other than that, 3, you can usually block into things and just go live. And it doesn't have any sort of scaling either. Once you finish that, the top path will take you to the Maker, 70 health, 4 mana gems, and 32 cards. I believe the Maker is the easier of the two between the Maker and Trifarian Gloryseeker. Their power is remove the imperfection. When the foe summons a unit, recall one of the player's followers with less power than it. That is going to be your main threat here, and that's going to be enhanced by Inspiring Mentor and Greenglade Elder. You can look at a chart of the powers of all of the units here. 6 is going to be a very common power, so on round 1 you're probably not going to want to drop anything that has less, or not a follower at least. You can drop a champion. Don't drop a follower with less than 6 power until your opponent has played a unit, because otherwise it's most likely going to be put back in your hand. Also, hilariously, they have Temple Guard, which is just a very vanilla 1-cost 3/3. Doesn't do anything. Pathless Ancient is another thing where it gets cost reduction but doesn't really do anything. They do have Solitary Monk, which can recall a bunch of things to their hand, and they usually have enough mana to replay all of those things, but which could recall a bunch of your units if your units had less power than theirs. I think these are the main threats. Silent Shadows here. It just has elusive. If you can get rid of it, that's fine. Greenglade Elder will give everything in their hand +1/+1, which means you need 1 more power to stay on the board. And Dawn and Dusk does get double advantage from Deadly, so if you Dawn and Dusk something that's 6 power, it'll go up to 9. And it just makes 2 copies, so you just have to be aware of that. Also, those summons from Dawn and Dusk will recall your units as well, but overall, I mean, that's all you're worrying about. It's just being able to keep a unit on the board. If you can do that, so like if your units are bigger than 9, let's say, or 8 even, they just don't do anything. It's just like a normal deck that you're playing against, so that's kind of nice. The other option, if you go to the bottom, is Trifarian Gloryseeker. This has 70 health, 4 mana gems, and 30 cards in their deck. They do have 2 copies of Incisive. I've been saying invasive this whole time, that's not even a word. Incisive Tactician, so that is Rally, and their power is Militant March. When one of the foe's units strikes for 5+ damage, granted +2/+2. Most of the units have 5+ damage, except for Thrashing Snapper, except they will if they block. They also have Bloody Business with Grifter's Deck and Elixir of Skill, so every time they play Bloody Business, they'll draw a card and create 2 more copies of Bloody Business in their deck. And that'll cost 1. They also have Whirling Death, so in combat they can remove one of your units, so you just need to be careful about how you're choosing to block. If you block with something that can be removed, then it will be removed. They have Basilisk Rider, which has Overwhelm, but it's not too bad, and Trifarian Shieldbreaker has Nomad's Medallion, so it's a very inexpensive 9/8 unit. They're able to play that round 1. Yeah. So here are your threats. Trifarian Gloryseeker has Quick Attack. You have Incisive Tactician, which will rally. You have your Basilisk Rider with Overwhelm, and Bloody Business, which again will come down, eventually be free, and it draws a card. It only draws 1, unlike Minotaur Reckoner's Guile, which draws 2, so it only replaces itself. It doesn't replace itself and give them card advantage. Well, extra card advantage, I guess. So that's what you have to worry about. As long as you can remove the units from the board. Trifarian Gloryseeker itself doesn't have very much health. Everything else, Thorn of the Rose and Trifarian Hope will have low health, but everything else does have kind of high health, which is why I think that the Maker is usually going to be your easier target here, because these will continue scaling. So yeah, that is a choice that you can make. And then we have Swain. Swain is the end boss here, whose power is Suffer. Round start, deal 3 to all the player's damage units. He also has a number of ways to damage units. He has 99 health, 5 mana gems, and 39 cards in his deck. I believe there are only 2 copies of Swain, the first one he starts with, and then one more. I tried it a couple times, and that's what I came up with. Swain does have Staunch Defender, so he starts on the board, and Black Cleaver. This makes him a, I think it's an 9/18 at start. I have him here as a 10/18, but he might have, that might have been later. But he might also just be a 10/18. I don't know anymore. I didn't highlight anything in his deck because everything in his deck is pretty threatening except for like House Spider. And I guess Imperial Demolitionist. Everything else you kind of have to worry about. He has a lot of spells that do damage. If you don't have defense spending, he'll usually level up on turn 2. Yeah, he's really strong. You have Iron Ballista with Ravenous Hydra, so that'll come down and deal 1 damage to all your units. And then he also has Aura Glinthorn, so all damage with also Ravenous Hydra actually. And so that'll come down, damage all your units, and then all your damaged units will become stunned. Again, everything damaged at round start will take 3 more damage, so you can lose a lot of units very fast between those two. You have Captain. Let's move on to actually showing them. So you have City Breakers. These come with Spell Shield versus normal where they don't. You have Decisive Maneuver, which is a fast spell and stuns an enemy, but it also gives all allies +2/+0 that round. You have Captain Calrix, who has Overwhelm and Elusive, and on Nexus Strike deals damage to the Nexus equal to half its health rounded up. That can be played on round 1. So on round 2, if you don't have an Elusive or a way to stun, Frostbite, whatever, stop it, you could just take 20 damage to your Nexus. That's a thing that happens. Captain Pharaon is an 8 cost 12/12 Overwhelm that creates 2 Decimates in hand. Those Decimates will do 8 damage. He also comes with Mana Deposit, which means you can play one of those Decimates for free. Like I said, you have Iron Ballista and Aura Glinthorn. Both have Ravenous Hydra. Aura Glinthorn being worse because on attack you stun all damaged units. You have the Leviathan. If Swain is on the board, Leviathan will, deal 1 damage to your Nexus twice. Didn't they used to be 3 times? Which will stun 2 of your units. And of course Swain himself, who has Overwhelm once he's leveled up, and Fearsome when he deals damage to your Nexus, he'll do 3 damage to all of your allies and your Nexus as like a follow-up. So yeah, which will basically clear your board most of the time. Also has Noxian Guillotine, which will kill a damaged unit to create a fleeting Noxian Guillotine in hand. I think there's only one of those in the deck. Yeah, there's only one. But he has a bunch of ways to damage your units, a bunch of ways to stun your units. He has Ravenous Flock to finish things out. He has Weapons of the Lost that does 6 damage to a unit, I think, and summons a Trifarian something. I can't remember right now which Trifarian it summons. But yeah, all of his deck is bad. It all just works to level Swain up. If you can remove Swain, that really helps. But you do have to worry about taking just a ton of damage all the time, and things like Aura Glinthorn, Decimate, are going to be very bad. So yeah, by then hopefully you're just strong enough. You have a way to remove Swain immediately. You can get around the spell shield on the City Breakers, hopefully, and you have a way to stall out Captain Kelrix. You have some blocker for Aura Glinthorn. Usually by the time Captain Pharaon or the Leviathan come down, your board should be fairly stable, although the double Decimate is 16 damage. He won't be able to play both in that round, but he'll play one in one round and one in the next round. Although sometimes he'll wait around before he does that. So Captain Pharaon will come down and then he'll play a unit and attack you probably. And then next round he'll play Decimate, and then the following round he'll play another Decimate. So you usually have like 3 rounds to deal with that. Yeah. And so that is Swain. You do not want him to stay on the board for an attack. Once he does that, everything gets so much worse. but he's hard to deal with because of all of the things that I've just mentioned. Yeah, House Spider's not that bad, I guess. And that's in his deck. So hopefully you get a lot of House Spiders and not a lot of anything else. There's less Battering Ram, which doesn't really matter. And that is it. That is the adventure. If you get through that, then you win. One thing that I didn't really talk about that I do want to go over is pathing. So the easiest way to go, in my opinion, so you're forced to go through Reckless Trifarian. Here you can pick Manasoul Student or Legion Marauder. I think they're about equally difficult. Manasoul Student can kill you quicker, but Legion Marauder, if you let it go on, will kill you eventually. And pretty quickly. Or I guess slowly, because it takes them a while. They don't have Overwhelm. As long as you can keep generating blockers, you can deal with that. If you have things that obliterate, you can get rid of the Legion Marauders so they don't use Deathless as well, and that's kind of nice. But yeah, I'm not sure the choice between Manasoul Student and Legion Marauder. I think that one's up for grabs. After that, you definitely want to go this down path to fight Crimson Aristocrat. Crimson Aristocrat is way easier than Lord Broadmane. Yeah, I mean, yeah, just yes. And then you fight Jhin, at which point you should take the Stagehand over Minotaur Reckoner. Even if your deck is strong, Minotaur Reckoner can still kill you because of just the infinity stuns that they have available to them. One thing that's actually kind of weird, and that I was doing to figure out how to deal with, or what was in all these decks, was cards with Brainworm. Making them discard cards is pretty good. So if you get something that is useful with Brainword, you can use that, and that helps them not have such overwhelming card advantage. That works on basically everything. But yeah, so you go down here, take the Stagehand, and then you're going to go for probably the Maker up top here. If you have a bunch of low-cost units or low-power units, you might want to take Trifarian Gloryseeker instead, especially if you have ways to remove Trifarian Gloryseeker and their units. You just can't let it spiral out of control, and it can, especially with Bloody Business. So just be careful of that. And then eventually you get to Swain up here, and hopefully by then your deck is good enough and you win. Like I said, my biggest tip here is you only have to do this 5 times, and yeah, only do it 5 times. And that is all. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. You can use this as a reference, as I have all of the cards and all of their powers, healths, costs, so you know what you're fighting against. And hopefully that helps. And like I said, I'm going to link the other people's spreadsheets in the description, so you can look at those if you need specific relic build for the various characters. And that's all. I think that's it. Thank you for watching. If you like what I'm doing, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, Lysandra. People want me to make a Lysandra guide. I'll work on it, but it's probably going to take me like a month or two. These things take forever. Gathering all the information, playing through the adventures a bunch of times to get familiarity with them. Swain was relatively easy. It took me like 2 weeks. Rolling Soul I've done 1,000 times. It took me probably like 30 or 40 hours of work to put together. Lysandra is going to be more. So yeah, but no, I'll do it eventually. It might just not be this year. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.